I feel like it always surprises me how people approach the topic and sort of where they're coming from, because like you say, it's you can have a couple of people who will say things that seem quite disconnected, and then a little while later, as more of the conversation kind of flows, everything starts weaving together because there's a lot of bottling up, and so when there is that space, there's a lot of quite profound in conversation, and someone might just make a throwaway comment, about something that they've experienced, and just that comment will just actually ring as quite profound because you may not have ever considered that perspective before.
This is At a Loss, a conversation about living fully in the presence and awareness of loss, grief, death, and in particular it's death we're talking about today. I'm funeral celebrant Timothy Giles, and in my work I came across the concept of death cafes and met Dean Nottingham. Kia ora, Dean.
Kia ora.
Before I define and explain what death cafes are, like their objective and where they came from, which I find really fascinating, how did you find out about them first, and what made you go, I'm interested in that?
Well, to be honest, it was outside a Countdown in Highbury Mall in Birkenhead. I would sometimes read the community notice boards just for, I don't know, to see what's going on. And I remember seeing the flyer for it and just thinking, like, the words death and cafe together are quite fascinating. And I mean, I'm pretty sure it was happening a few days after that. So I just popped into the Birkenhead library and thought it was fantastic. Like, I've always tended to be quite interested in the whole concept surrounding life and death and how strange the whole sort of human experience is. And I feel like there's not really a space to have those kind of conversations openly without people giving you like a little bit of a side eye. So I thought that having that kind of space was incredible. Yeah.
So that sort of space. So all you knew was you're at a supermarket, you read the notice board. Did you look into it anymore, or you just turned up?
Oh, I just turned up.
So what?
Yeah.
When you say the space, what sort of space did you walk into?
Well, I just took a pew and kind of just listened initially, and we were going around in circles, introducing ourselves and kind of saying what brought us here. I said something similar, that I'd just been to Countdown and seen the flyer, and yeah.
In Auckland, the setup is that Auckland libraries, if you walk into Auckland Library and you want to run one, then they've got a whole system where they go, yeah, we'll help you and we'll do that. So I went to my 3 closest libraries and finally found one where, okay, the chief librarian and the librarian who runs all their community engagement, they were like, we should do this. They didn't know much about it either, and we've started one. So for me, really, it was like, okay, Alison, I'll do it if you leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll talk about my experience a bit more as we go, but I'm really grateful to her for that.
100%.
What made you decide you're starting one day?
So I think that this has been, like, as I said before, it's a topic that has just always kind of been in the front of my mind. And I really get a sense of, I guess maybe what resonated with me about it is I notice family members and people that I know who have kind of got into those last stages of life. And I notice in some of them, it's not until they're just about to go through that transition that there's the realization flash through them that I was alive this whole time. I was a free agent, and I feel like I didn't live the life that I wanted to live. And that kind of view really resonates with me, because I feel as though without confronting's the wrong word, without kind of looking into our own mortality and accepting that, we never really live our lives. We just more exist through them.
Okay.
And so that was the sort of core of, like, this is an important thing that's drawn me to it. And then when I was there, I just turned up, and then Alison was like, "We'd love for you to come back," and so I just kept coming back and kept coming back, because what she said is it's traditionally something that attracts older people, because it's usually older people who are having those realizations of, I'm mortal, because I think it happened to me a year ago. I woke up one morning and my back was sore, and it was just like, oh no, like this is the start. And I guess that just doesn't stop.
Yeah,
Like,
it 100% doesn't. I'm 57, right? And you're 28 years old with a sore back going, oh no, I'm aging.
Yeah. Well, I think it literally is that sense of like, oh, oh no, and
that's the first glimpse of your own mortality.
Yeah, just some mild back pain,
which is not
and then
to say,
becomes
a slightly melodramatic reaction, I might think.
Oh, 100%, very melodramatic reaction.
I've got a sore back. I'm dying.
Yeah. But there was a sense of just like I did notice that of the death cafes, it does tend to be the older cohort of our communities who attend them. And I feel like death is not something that just happens when you're old. Like, you and I could not make it to bed this evening. It's kind of the reality of the situation.
I have. I've outlived my big brother, which I never wanted to, but I'm now. I'm I think 10 years older than he ever got to be. That's wrong. That's not the way it was meant to be, but that's how it is. And in my work, I'm now present to funerals I've done of people far, far too young, and having to sit with the parents of a child who's died. Anyway, your motivation is right on aligned with the whole foundation of it. So I said I wanted to ask you before I explain where Death Cafes come from. So founded in 2011 in the UK by a man called John Underwood. And the first one was in his own home, facilitated by his mum, Sue, who happened to be a psychotherapist. Since then, that's 2011, Death Cafes have happened in 97 countries. More than 250,000 participants have taken place. And here's the objective, which I think you actually summarised really well. Whether you're doing that deliberately, I don't know, Dean. But the objective that Death Cafe has is this: increase the awareness of death with a view to helping people make the most of our finite lives, with no intention of leading people to any conclusion, product, or course of action. That's it. Here's what I've found since I started mine. Had no idea how many people were going to turn. Look, I don't know what yours are like, but we have somewhere between 9 to a dozen people who've come each time, and the same people, come back, but not necessarily every month. We only do ours once a month. And the motivations have been really, everyone has, usually two different motivations, and almost all of them have this one in common, which is, I want to have a conversation about death, and particularly my own death, but the people around me won't let me do it. They don't want to talk about it. And at the end of our last Death Cafe conversation, a woman who'd been there for the first time put it beautifully where she said, I really appreciate being able to talk about these things with people who are prepared to.
I just want to, you mentioned there that someone had the expression of people won't let me speak about it. And I think that's kind of reminding me of the death taboo that we have culturally. And it's not just, Kiwi culture. It's a lot of places around the world have it. And I wouldn't say it's like you are not allowed to talk about this. It's just, even the word death can sometimes bring up a response in people that's like, oh, like, I'm not prepared to go there, if you know what I mean.
Dean, one person brought up in one of our conversations, she's at an age where she's reading the death notices, right?
Right.
Every day.
Yeah.
She and her husband sit down and read.
Mm.
And she and one of the men in the conversation had the same observation, which is even in death notices, people are using euphemisms. We're not going to say died. We're going to say passed over, is at rest, is at peace. So if you can't even say it in a death notice, that's a pretty deeply embedded taboo.
Oh, it's a very it's not just with death, but it is this sort of what would you say, sanitization of like, oh, we can't use that word. And it's like, wow, it's inevitable and it's natural.
Yeah. Yeah. What's been in my mind recently has been that death denying is not death defying, and it's almost like we think it is. If I don't talk about it, it won't happen. But I can't think of anything else that we're so stupid about. It's so utterly inevitable.
It is quite neurotic, like it's that thing of
says the 28-year-old with the terminal back condition.
Well, 100%. Exactly. Yeah.
So you do understand neurosis quite well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a massive culprit of it. Yeah. Who is this man? No, I'm kidding. I find, even the sense of just that not talking about it, as you say, it doesn't remove it. It just makes you less prepared when it comes. And then how is one meant to have a good death if the whole thing is just panic and anxiety and why is this happening to me? And it's like, wow, I remember, is it a Latin phrase, memento mori, or something like that? Yeah, that just remember you will die. And it's like, I feel like that has always been a cultural thing in the past of just that inevitability and that impermanence of our lives that seems to, I don't know, have just been kind of covered up in a way.
So when do any conversations or people in your 2 years of going to Death Cafe and then deciding, man, I'm gonna actually put my hand up and run one for people, right? Were there particular people or conversations that stood out for you? I mean, I've certainly got one or two that do for me.
Yeah, there definitely were. One of the first ones was would you like to share yours first?
No.
Should I just get into it?
How very polite of you. No, you go ahead.
Sweet. One was a gentleman at that Birkenhead Death Cafe, and the first time that I had seen him, I can't quite remember if I was new at this point or if I had been a few times and then he had appeared. But he had recently lost his wife. She had, and so it was him kind of dealing with that, because with her death also came the death of essentially like his life, the way that his whole way of being was built around that relationship with his partner that he'd been with for decades and decades. And classic sort of man of an older generation, his sort of thing was like, I don't really know how to be. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And although it's not a grief counseling or like a grief session, of course emotions come out, and it seemed as though for him having that space where everyone would essentially just hold the feeling and not try and change it, not try and fix it, just accept that this is, what's coming out. And it was over the following Death Cafes, over months and months and months, I began to see this slow sort of transition of this going through these stages of acceptance and growth and moving and having this place to kind of, as you say, express those feelings without the judgment of, you can't talk about that, don't talk to me about that, because it almost seems as though if someone hasn't experienced that level of loss, from what a lot of people have said, it's almost like people can't meet them there. Like people aren't ready to have that deep of a conversation the person kind of needs. And I'd stopped attending for a few months, maybe half a year or so. And then when I eventually came back, I was like amazed by the transformation that he had kind of been through. And he was telling me all about how he'd gotten into photography and he'd started taking photos. And one of the things he said that was quite salient was that when he gets up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and he goes out to a beach and takes a photo, that was when he feels most connected to his wife. And so there was almost this sense of he had accepted that although physically she's gone, he still has this connection to her in a more profound way in her physical absence, if that makes sense.
No, makes no sense. But you'd seen a change in a man, and like a new life had emerged. He'd lost a life of decades, and when you said his life was, built around that relationship, it's like, yes, the routines of every day of getting up and being with this person, and that defines much of our day. Never mind the ways in which we have social connection. Particular thing, we often hear it is a cliche, and a cliche founded in a lot of evidence, that older men who lose their partner, it's often her who does, or who does the social interaction.
Yeah, I think it is that sense of almost losing a sense of self with the person.
Completely.
Yeah.
You, though, have made it sound, Dean, to me like that sounded like a grief support group you were just describing. What's the difference between a grief support group and a death cafe? Because they explicitly say, right, death cafes are not a grief support group and they're not a counselling session.
Yes.
Do you think yours became that?
I think that there is a tendency in a lot of people when they see someone suffering to help, to try and fix the problem, so to speak. And I think with a topic like death, it is likely to attract people who have had quite a significant encounter with something like that. And I feel that it makes it not unusual that emotions, quite powerful emotions, will come up. And I think a lot of that is how the group and the facilitator, but it's not how the group and the facilitator kind of navigate that space without it turning into direct counseling for a person.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I guess I haven't been to a counseling support group, so I couldn't really give as clear of a difference. Have you had experience with counseling support groups?
Yeah.
As opposed to death cafes?
Lots facilitated both. And you're not fixing, I think, is really important. One of the acknowledgements of a recent death cafe, because the way that I start mine is, if you want to speak, what's your name? What brings you here today? Right? And for people on the first time, it's often very similar things. But for people coming back again, there's normally, I've got curious about this, or I've been looking about this, or I've been thinking about this, or right. And at the end, there's what's something you're taking away? And a woman said to me, here's what I really like about this. And she was saying it to everyone. She's saying, thank you for creating a space where I felt safe to say anything I wanted to say and no one was going to laugh at me. But also, if I didn't want to say anything, I didn't have to either. I really like that. And that someone is able to say something, and we have had experiences like you've described from the man that you've just been talking about, where people speak about death, a profound loss, their experience. And it may be that no one else actually speaks directly to that. The conversation just moves on. And to me, that's the difference of a support group, a counselling session, death cafe. We don't need to meet the person where they're at. We just, that's what you've said. And I think that's an important part in, I'm allowed to say whatever it is. And that is going on for me in this particular moment. And as you said, this man over months moved and changed. but I can say it, and it doesn't then make me the center of everyone's attention, and I'm not going to have to deal with everyone then talking to me about my thing. And I think that's an important element of it. It's a lot lighter touch than a support group or a counselling session, to my mind.
Yeah. I find more often than not, it's people who have experienced loss in their past that will show up and have reflections based on how they've had to integrate that whole loss internally, because there hasn't been that space more often than someone coming with pure raw sort of recent emotion.
Yeah. What's interesting for me is what I've noticed more often, and so this is an interesting contrast, and I guess that any individual death cafe you might walk into is going to be different, is that for me, it's people preparing around their own mortality. So one of the conversations that we've had recently that I really enjoyed was one person came and said, I need to settle myself around death. And I've got a whole lot of stuff I need to do. Now, they're at a stage in life where they've been waking up with back pain for many decades more than you, Dean. And they're saying, I've got things I need to organise. There's quite a bit to do. And yes, it's partly prompted by being of an age where they're attending more funerals than weddings and 21sts. And saying, there's stuff I need to organise, but I can't organise it until I'm settled. And what happened with the conversation around that was that people were then speaking to the mundane, the tasks around dying. What do I need to organise? What do I need to sort out? How much of a chaotic mess at home or in my financial life or even in the medical decisions that might need to be made if I'm indisposed and unable to make those decisions for myself? Do I organise that ahead of time, or do I leave that until it just lands on everybody in an already overwhelming and confusing, distressing time? And where we got to in the conversation was people saying, in the doing and the organising, we settle ourselves, and as we settle ourselves, we're able to do more of that organising. Now, that conversation at no point felt particularly significant. It certainly didn't have any emotional impact, heaviness, weight, anyone feeling like we needed to take care of anyone around it. It was just very, very practical. And yet at the same time, quite a significant emotional movement happened in the space of our 1 hour conversation. So that same person was saying, you know what, I'm ready to start doing some stuff now. I feel a little bit more settled already. And that drive I'm hearing again and again from people of saying, people won't talk to me about it, and I need to, my kids will shush me, my partner will shush me, but I need to talk about this at this time. Right? And that's what I've noticed in our group of people who come is most regularly it. And then there's some others who are like, I just wonder about this stuff and I want to be able to talk about it, and people don't like to. So those are the more driving things that have come through in our conversations, rather than people speaking about a particular grief or a loss.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like there's the mixture between. So I've experienced people who are having that sort of discussion about a loss. There's people who are interested in like end of life plans, end of life care plans, and stuff like that. And what support and resources are out there for someone who's going through it in terms of kind of funeral planning. But then, as you're saying, that more general sort of like estate planning and preparation for all of, I guess, for lack of a better term, like the paperwork or like the practical side around it. Sorry?
Well, you spoke early on about the taboo and
Yes.
that element of surprise of how little we talk about it. Something that surprises me is how much there is to talk about. So when I looked at death cafes as an idea, I thought, okay, that's kind of curious. And then I enjoyed the relaxed space around it, and I enjoyed the fact that conversation can be lively, but then also there can be moments when we're just sitting there and it's quite comfortable, and no one needs to fill a space because it naturally the conversation moves on. Anyway, there is so much to talk about, and the idea of holding a space where there isn't an agenda, then there's not tasks to do or topics and subjects to cover. Now, as a host or a facilitator of this stuff, and having done lots of different facilitation in various areas, not having an agenda or a task is quite an uncomfortable space to be. But it's really easy in this space, and I like the fact that we can have 9 people speak in a row, and 2 of them might connect on one topic, but we might have completely unrelated conversations that happen, and yet it feels like quite a cohesive chat.
Yeah. I feel like it always surprises me how people approach the topic and sort of where they're coming from, because like you say, you can have a couple of people who will say things that seem quite disconnected, and then a little while later, more of the conversation kind of flows, everything starts weaving together, because there's a lot of I guess, what would you say, a lot of bottling up, and so when there is that space, there's a lot of awesome conversations that kind of come out of it, using that word like in the same
the death word?
Oh, no, I was just meaning like awesome conversations. Like it's not like woohoo, yeah, it's just some of them are quite profound. And someone might just make a throwaway comment, about something that they've experienced. And just that comment will just actually ring as quite profound, because you may not have ever considered that perspective before.
The other thing that interests me is how we only do it month. The only complaint we've had about our death cafe is that it's not often enough, right?
Oh, right.
So once a month is not often enough. And, maybe other people can start ones in our neighborhood, and that would be great. But what interests me is the way that conversations month to month progress. And on the people shushing me from wanting to talk, and the first person who brought this up is in their late 80s, I think, and was talking about children, not wanting to have this conversation. But then a month or so later, the conversation came up from someone else there, which is they'd lost their elderly parent recently and were regretting that they hadn't had the conversation. All these conversations about how you feel about death, what you want to have happen, what you don't. Just, are you settled within it? What's unsettled? By not having the conversation because it felt awkward, they now sit with a regret.
Because it totally is, because it's like you can't ask those questions, and that's a very human experience, connecting on that topic. That's now, I don't want to say a missed opportunity, but it's kind of
it is a missed opportunity. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's something that, I guess you never, like, a relationship never really ends until someone dies, and then whatever's happened is in a sense permanent. And I mean, there's so much. Like recently I bought, for mum and dad, I saw this awesome gift, and it was essentially just, I would like to hear your story. And it's this book that just has a series of questions, just pages and pages of questions about really obscure things of what music did you listen to as a kid? Like, who was your first this? What did you do this? And it's kind of like a bit morbid, it's like, oh, I've got you guys this book. I'd love for you to fill it out. It's like, oh, do you think something's going to happen to us? And it's like, no,
Well,
but
yes,
I would like to take the opportunity. Like,
well, actually, yes, something is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And
yeah. How's your back pain?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that what has surprised me is how the conversations don't feel morbid. They, the very fact that people are coming into this conversation and saying, "Oh, I appreciate being able to do this," reflects the lightness that actually happens. There's a lot of laughter. Yes, there's poignancy, right? There are occasionally, but rarely, tears. There's more laughter, and it doesn't feel morbid. It does feel like some of the fear and the anxiety and the tension around death dissipates as it's being talked about. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize it could feel this comfortable because I've never had the conversations. I've been afraid of them. And it surprises me how it relaxes stuff. My hope is, Dean, because very often people are saying, I don't know how to have these conversations with people around me, and I want to, especially when people have got someone who has died and they're regretting that they didn't have the conversations with them because, as you say, it's now fixed. Can't resolve that now.
Yeah.
That one of the constant questions that comes up is, how do I raise this with the people who are close to me and not have them shut the conversation down or freak out, right? And I haven't found an answer to that other than in the experience of having the conversation in the death cafe with strangers and then people that you gradually get to know over the process of time, but different people come each time. And by having that conversation, I think that's so far the only way I can see that we actually make it easier to have the conversation is, I've had this conversation 4 or 5 times now with different people and nothing terrible happened. That maybe that is the way we prep ourselves to make it easier to raise the conversation with those close to us.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's just normalization. Pretty much, it's like, I find, we had a family member pass away a couple of years back, and I just remember the thought of having a conversation with a different family member, and they were just saying to me, like, it's kind of spooky. They're here and then they're just never there. Like, it's a bit weird. And then a couple of days later, you're back at work and not thinking about it. And it's like that, the person that passed away, like, that's the real thing, like, that's the real human experience. And I feel like that needs to be more normal. It needs to be more talked about because there's so much in terms of learning from people before they pass away. And also the person who is going through the process not being totally gripped with fear. Obviously, there's fear of the unknown, of what happens to me after my body dies. But there's the thought of it doesn't need to be. Well, I guess again, like, I'm only 29, but there's the thought of, does it need to be so terrifying?
The unspoken makes it.
It gives it weight. It gives it a lot of, what would you say? It makes it very foreboding.
Exactly. Well said. Love that. Other topics that have come up for me consistently, you mentioned funerals earlier on, and the conversation about why funerals exist. Are they for the living or for the dead? And people have been really, really clear that the funerals or memorials or the gatherings are for the living. And these conversations where people say, oh, no, I don't want a funeral. But then what it turns out of what people have most enjoyed is it's not the gathering of people they don't want. What they didn't want was people gathering into some grim space where people don't, if you're not a regular churchgoer and if you don't feel comfortable in a chapel setting, then it's like, no, I don't want people to do that. But one of the people who really said, I really, really don't want a funeral. And other people are like, oh, but that's kind of selfish from their experience of wanting to get together with other people and remember someone that had died.
Mm.
What it turned out that they loved was a friend of theirs had died who had then paid for a dinner for their like 12, 13 closest friends at a
Oh.
restaurant they all used to go to together, and to go, that. And does the word funeral fit? Everyone decided no, the word funeral didn't fit, but it did what a funeral was meant to do. And they said it was the most wonderful experience. Everyone getting together. The person who was dead, their absence was really, really felt and obvious, because this was the place they'd go and have their catch-ups together and have their time. But everyone was able to talk about it. There was tears. There was that recognition of the loss and the hole that was left. And also there was that space of being with everyone and telling the stories and life still continuing and the dead person still being with them in a way not unlike your man you were talking about at dawn taking his photographs. I'm still present to you. In that restaurant, ironically, right, at the same time that their absence is most powerfully felt, their presence is.
Yeah, it's. I have one of my best friends. He had a similar thing when his grandfather passed away. Is the family and the grandfather decided, like, I don't want a funeral. I just want you guys to go out and have a meal. And he expressed the same sort of thing. Was they were doing something where he would have regularly been in attendance, and it was. He said it was beautiful, just completely beautiful of having as a family, like the freedom to acknowledge the person's life and remember them in a way that they would have liked and that the family felt was appropriate outside of that traditional, must be within this kind of way and this kind of ceremony. I think that freedom, I think, really comes from having a clearer understanding of, like, this is normal, this is going to happen, and you can actually do it how you wish to as a family or as whoever the person's network is.
I scribbled down one of the ways that this was described and pulled it up before talking to you, which is, it said, I don't need a funeral, but there's a social need to gather at the death of a friend or a relative, to remember, to celebrate, and to honour. Now, it doesn't need to be a funeral or a memorial.
Yeah.
It's just a gathering.
Yeah.
But with a purpose, right? And one of the things I do love about working as a funeral celebrant is, I think, one of the whether it's in someone's garden, whether it's at their sports club, right? Is that the power of being together is that you don't have to explain. Everyone there knows why we're there, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that really helps.
I think as well, it's that sense of, like you mentioned before, a person might say, I don't want a morbid gathering of, this or that. And it's kind of that sense of, we all know why we're here. I really love the perspective. It's more of a celebration of the life than, a grieving of the loss, because both of those are the same thing. You can spend the time telling, like, stories that make everyone just laugh, and you laugh your ass off. And within that, there's the kind of emotion that comes through of who that person was and what they kind of gave to us,
And at the same time, the sadness can come of, I'm not going to have that again.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So this is quite a good example for me of how Death Cafe conversations roll in that. Then that led to a conversation which came of, okay, if funeral is not the right word, so some people want a funeral, great, let's do a funeral, let's do it in that formal way, and it really does work, and there can be comfort in formal rituals and in religious rituals and in rites, and there's a real place for that. Not necessarily for everybody, not all the time, but you don't have to lose the good bits without it. Now, one person there had said, and actually they're a retired clergy member, right? And
Mhm.
and and
Mm.
and is now no longer being in ministry, having time in their own way to just spend time working through their own thoughts, feelings, experiences without
Mm.
having to tend to others. I said, hey, what's the word? And their suggestion was that the word, if it's not funeral memorial, is a reconstellation. And I wrote this down
Mm.
again to share with you because it was this for me is an example of what I
Yeah.
like about the Death Cafe. I never know what the conversation's going to be, but their suggestion was perhaps it's a reconstellation. What does that mean? One star dies. So the relationships between living stars must reform into a new constellation. And
Wow.
perhaps those that we value, love, and that wish to remember together come together, and with that absence, there is a reconstellation.
That's beautiful. That's a really eloquent way to conceptualize it. Because it totally is. It's like someone's, someone, any person within any network or any sort of constellation is so pivotal. Just having that person there, and there totally is a restructuring once that person leaves, because and a lot of times that person has social roles within their community and their families and stuff. Um, Reconstellation is an awesome word.
That's, to me, and part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you is I would have been very reluctant to go to a death cafe because I don't know if
Right.
I'm not great at walking into new social situations, and I see these things. And I went to the pub the other night, had a big day at work, and so I'm just gonna, I'd done my exercise in the morning. I'm just gonna have a pint on the way home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm sitting there on my own there, just in the pub in the corner having a pint, in the great dysfunctional English tradition. But then
Yeah.
I went through to like this ante room, one side room, and there's, I don't know, 18 people maybe playing backgammon, right? And,
Oh, whoa.
and they're
Yeah.
really unlike people. And I look at that going, that's so great. And there was this one particular bloke there, and he was in a wheelchair, and he's sitting at a backgammon board, and there's no one playing with him. He looks up and he goes, "You want to play?" And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, no." Walked off, went, sat down, and thought, "I'd love to play. I don't know how to play backgammon, but
Yeah.
socially, I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I can't. No, I can't. Right?"
Yeah, yeah.
And so for me, the same thing with Death Cafe was I'd be really curious about it. Would I have the courage to walk into a library and walk up to a group of people and go, "Hey, here for the death conversation"? Probably not. Which is why I want to have this conversation and saying, actually, another thing I've really loved about the experience is in our little library group, there's always a chair, at least one chair more than the people who are sitting there. And I've been really impressed that people will come in. They might come after the start, and they might need to go before we finish, but they come and they go, "Hi, I'm just here for this." And I'm so impressed by that. And I am yet to have anyone leave without wanting to express their gratitude for being there and how people have been. So for me, the reason I want to have this conversation is if someone like me was listening to go, just turn up, it'll be all right. There's a low barrier to entry.
Oh, 100%. I totally feel as though some people see the flyer and go like, that's really interesting. Also kind of strange. Probably not my cup of tea. And don't think about it. And then in the library, there'll be a spare spot, and you'll see people will walk past and they'll give you that kind of look. Like they know what the group is and they're just having a gaze, and they'll see an open chair and we kind of just give them a little wave. And some people just pop in and go like, I wasn't going to come, but I saw you guys here, and they'll sit down every single time. Even if they don't say anything, there is that sense of like, this was not what I expected at all. This was amazing. Like, thank you. And a lot of them have come back. Yeah. it is that sense of, I guess, open chair policy. You know, there's always people that are just milling about that come and check it out.
So I'm going to wrap the conversation up in the next couple of
Yeah.
minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Have a think if there's anything that's top of mind for you that you wanted to say. I wanted to thank you, Dean, for doing this conversation, because when the same Alison who said, "Love to have you come back," and you went back, is the one who said, "Giles, you should really do one of these," and then kept saying, "You should really do one of these." I met you at a meeting of, what was it, Compassionate Communities, Hono Hono Tato, and a whole bunch of people doing things around Mercy Hospice and stuff in the community, and Death Cafe being just one of them. But there was a bunch of you who facilitated or hosted death cafes, but you were the youngest. You were also a bloke, which it's very much dominated by women, and that's why I wanted to get you in. Was I thought, okay, I didn't realize how young you are, right? That partly explains why you're so ridiculously athletic in your bearing. But have a think about how you want to wrap up, and here's how I want to. I'm so grateful for the people that I have met in this conversation of going out to hold this little death cafe in the library, and the manager of the library and the librarian who runs the events, who also curates for us every month, has some books out on these. We have these little low kind of coffee table size or height tables, and Hillary puts these books out and curates the list, and they change every month. And I appreciate her work in doing that, and every month some books get issued, and we're about to, Hillary and I have decided that we're going to invite people to do a book review, even though you're not meant to have an agenda in the Death Cafe. It's like, do you want to do a book review of a book you've taken away? Because I'd be quite interested in that. I'm not a as great a reader as I used to be. I just can't consume as many books as I used to, so I want other people to edit them for me. And the other thing I've loved the most is people who are unlike, different ethnicities, different ages, different relationship orientations, different, times and stages of life, and different, financial and socioeconomic situations. Sit there and we have this conversation, and it's easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow consistently and at great pace all the time. It just has its own way of being. But I come away and people have talked to me about things in their life or their experience, or I've heard someone say something and someone else, and I watched two people who I thought, man, there's no way I could see you two getting on. And yet often the least likely person in a particular group and conversation will say, "Oh, I just wanted to comment on what you said over there," and they'll like back them up. They'll be the most intrigued in that, and I'll be like, "Wow, that I didn't see that coming at all." That's what I love, and I guess as I say that, the fact that I hate when we don't see death coming. Okay, with traumatic death, with suicides, with people dying very young, we don't see it coming. Get that. But to be so horrendously unrehearsed for the impact of death, I think causes us all sorts of problems. And I'm really grateful that people will sit there in that room with me once a month and just talk about the thing that, I don't know, maybe if I tried and raise it over a pint at the backgammon table, it just would not go down well, And I value that. What's your closing thought, Dean?
So just a couple of things you've said resonated. The thought of we don't often think about it, until the end. It's almost like, I guess what I would say is there's a sense of like, the weather's really sunny and warm, winter's never going to come. And it's like, well, it is, which means, start preparing. But it's also not to say like, think about that all the time and let it consume you. It's just this thought of, it's just an innate experience that every living being shares. And I think those points that I love are when there are people who attend who are from completely different backgrounds, whether culturally, socioeconomically, whichever. And I feel like undeniably, like death is the one thing that like all of us share, and inherent in that is a shared that shared anxiety. Even if there was no taboo of death, that would still exist because of how unknown it is. And I think that what I love about it is it's only through those kind of conversations of normalization where there is the sense of kind of slowly draining the fear out of it, and as drained as it can possibly be, until it is just seen as something that is inevitable, something that is natural, something that I can prepare for, not just, prepare, but in the sense of that really informs how we live our lives, knowing that it is finite, which I guess, like you say, kind of does resonate a lot with the formal description of death cafes. But it's true, it's true. Without that realization, there's never, well, I won't say there's never, but it's very difficult to truly live in an authentic way.
Well, there's always a fear.
Mm.
I think you used the term foreboding earlier on.
Yeah.
And I may not get to the place, or other people will think they may not get to the place where we are entirely ready or welcoming. Some do.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm aware of someone in my broader social circle right now who is in a hospice and has said, "I'm ready to go now."
Yeah.
Now that's a beautiful space to get to.
Yeah.
If we can have a run up to that of a number of years, ideally, I may not be ready and I may not be entirely resolved, but I am able to accept that death occurs, and I'm able to sit in the context of it and not shut people down and not have to run away myself.
I think that's the key, that distinction of not like, okay, I'm ready to go now. It's just the acceptance of when it comes, like, oh, this is happening,
Thank you for your volunteering and creating what you are. I'm excited to watch where you go. My hope is that if you're listening to the conversation between Dean and I, and you're curious about a death cafe, you might, if you live in Tamaki you find out if there's one in the library near you. If you're elsewhere, they're all over the country and in 97 countries worldwide. Go, pop along to one. You meet people like Dean and I, and if you don't like the sound of us, then you'll also meet people older, wiser, calmer. And if there isn't one happening near you, and you want to start one yourself, we'll get in touch. I'd be up for helping you and advising you wherever you are. Dean, thank you for the conversation, and I think I might pop into your death cafe one day and just take part.
Groovy. Thank you as well. Thank you for your time and sharing your thoughts.
Okay. So you're bad back, aged 29, did you say? 28?
29.
And now you're a man who says groovy. I know that.
Yeah.
It was great to talk to you, Dean. This has been At a Loss, conversation with me, Timothy Giles. I'm a funeral celebrant with people that I get to meet through my work and the privileged context of having conversations that aren't always comfortable for people. If there's a conversation that you would like to hear, to have, to be part of, then please just get hold of me. Giles at ataloss.nz. Giles at ataloss.nz.